I didn't want to take the meeting, right? Like I was forced to take the meeting, and my first reaction, look, chatbot for mental health is a joke. Like, why are we like, let's not get there. This was like 2020, yeah. 21. What are your thoughts? Would you give it to your patients? Like, oh, this tool sounds like Wysa. Like, how do you know? Like, oh, I use Wysa for myself. That we're excited about, right? 150 million Indians alive today will die of cancer at some point in their life, and we don't have the infrastructure to kind of solve for it. Historically, people have just been thankful that they received care, and now there is a demographic that doesn't stop there. Wants a little bit more. You have your top 50 to 60 million consumers, then you have your next 150 to 200 million consumers. I think these two categories would really resonate higher quality experiences because they're used to getting that from a Zomato or from, for example, about 40% of outpatient spend in India is labs or medicines. That number in the US is about 14 to 15%.
Welcome to the first episode of Moonshot Projects, a podcast where we discuss ideas, ventures, and insights to enable you to make a radical impact. Idea is to pick one space for each episode and go really deep into that. For our first episode, we're going deep into healthcare, and the guest we have is Dr. Pankaj Jethwani. Dr. Pankaj has worn many hats. He has been a doctor in Mumbai, he's been a consultant at BCG, spent some time as an operator in Iora Health, and now a venture investor. As a partner of W Health Ventures, he funds technology-led companies across India, US, and the Middle East. He's at the forefront of healthcare innovation globally. So, in this episode, we go deep into understanding possibilities of future care, what are the opportunities that are ripe for disruption as of today, the role AI plays in healthcare, and we also spend a little bit of time on spaces that are hot, like mental health and longevity. Stay tuned. If we take any other industry, we compare it with the emerging markets versus the developed. I'm sure the developed markets would be like way better, have way more facilities. But if you take healthcare and look at how it's in emerging markets and the biggest nations, the US, I think something fundamentally is broken in healthcare across the world. So I'm really curious to know why is it the case? Like why is healthcare broken globally?
Huh. Yeah, healthcare is like a complex industry. When you're building in healthcare, you're building not only for your patient, you're also building for the physician, you're building for the insurance company, the pharma company, and the multiple stakeholders uh, uh, make it hard to really innovate, right? When you're building an iPhone, you're not worried about your chip manufacturer or your supply chain or your logistics. You're building product basis what the consumer wants, and it's
Yep.
hard to do that in healthcare, just given the diverse stakeholders. Healthcare is also slow to change, right? It takes 17 years for an evidence-based practice to find adoption at the front line,
Yep.
and it's kind of hard to you know build fast in healthcare, right? Because and for the right reasons. You can't break things and build fast when it comes to patients' lives, and so
Yep.
heavily complex and regulated industry as well. And there's a decent amount of like information asymmetry in the space, given the multiple stakeholders, given the large strategics that have fair amount of dominance in the space.
Yep.
And so it's a challenging industry to build in, right? And to innovate on, and I think that is the opportunity for founders who are looking to build. If it is simple, then there wouldn't be this large of an opportunity. And Yeah.
All right. So multiple stakeholders, slow to change. There's an information big asymmetry that's going on currently. So I know you named 2070 Health, talking about how to build the future of healthcare. So before we talk about what you're building at 2070 Health, what does the future of healthcare look like for you? Like, what are the obvious changes that you see coming maybe in the next 10 years, 20 years that should fundamentally change versus what's happening right now?
Yeah. Look, our view of what is the future of healthcare is not very different from what a first principle view would be, or what the view would be for a lot of folks. I think the the hypothesis we have is that, look, we have a future that we want to build towards, and how to get there is what we feel we're doing a little bit differently at 2070 Health. But I think the future of healthcare should be, completely patient first and patient centric. There is, you know, can we bring the same obsession that we have when we're building consumer brands to healthcare? Can we bring best practices clinically as well into these patient journeys? Can we provide care not really obsess over where the care should be delivered? Should it be in a clinic or a hospital or at home? But can we really answer that question when it comes to a patient's perspective, right? There are certain things that are best delivered within the clinic. There are certain things that should be at home at all points. And can care be more continuous and passive, right? Like with the advancements we're seeing in AI around us, uh, opens up a lot of opportunities that we didn't have, even like 3 or 5 years ago. So, can we move to a place where healthcare data is used more intelligently, where care is more passive and continuous, where you can get the best of the care irrespective of who your neighborhood doctor is. You can get the care that a patient would in the US. Can you get that in rural India or in um, because we can build technologies and systems really um, around the entire clinical experience. So, very excited about what the future has in store. Getting there is not going to be easy, right? It is not that, okay, in 5 years AI is going to change healthcare. Now, if that happens, it's all great, and like some of our bets will play out. But the reality is, go to market is still filled with friction. Willingness to pay on the consumer side is almost next to nothing. Uh, Insurance ecosystems in many places in the global south still evolving, still emerging. In the West, these insurance ecosystems are uh, again, fairly slow to change and adopt. And healthcare delivery continues to be a local business. That's why you don't find national health or global healthcare delivery companies, right? Like you don't find a Mass General is great in Boston, but it's not a global brand, or a Cleveland Clinic is not a global brand, right? Everyone knows of Cleveland Clinic throughout the world, because healthcare delivery is still fairly local. Are there digital versions of these companies that can really take market share beyond a second opinion or a teleconsult or anything? This is all still TBD. But the future of healthcare will be deeply influenced by how we can create beautiful and patient-centric journeys, leveraging the best uh, of technology out there, as well as combining it with rational healthcare practices that need to be in place. And a lot to do, and fairly excited about what's in store.
You touched upon one key aspect on not having any global healthcare companies. Is that set to change? We have seen technology companies that have started in the US, have grown global. We're seeing a lot more digital health companies that's scaling really fast, raising hundreds and millions of dollars that maybe started in the COVID. So would you see a global healthcare company, from India to the world or just to the world?
Yeah, look, I think we already see that in some parts of healthcare, right? Like in life sciences or in medical devices, you have product companies that are basically innovating somewhere and selling throughout the world. In healthcare delivery, absolutely. Look, there's no obsession of being like you can be a very, very large healthcare company by operating just in one geography, right? Forget
Yeah.
forget a state. You can be a large company in healthcare, large organization in healthcare, you know, delivering or operating just in Boston or New York or in Delhi or in Bangalore for that instance, right? So you don't have to really become global to get to a massive scale. Having said that, there should be opportunities. I think there will be a breed of companies that are doing care delivery innovation from India. They will start in India. They will perfect fine tune product in India across millions and millions of patients. India will be a large consumer market for them, and then they will expand to adjacent markets, right? Be it Southeast Asia, be it the Middle East, be it LATAM, be it other parts of the world. There are also, Indian care delivery companies aspiring to launch and scale in the US, and we feel that there will be some innovation there. We see that as a common playbook for Israeli companies or companies being born, digital health companies being born in Europe, for example, where they usually find go to market, or they usually expand to US in their go to market as well. So borders are getting irrelevant over time. Healthcare is heavily regulated, and every market is slightly different from a regulation standpoint, very different from a go-to-market standpoint. And so those nuances, I'm sure the best companies continue to figure out. And so to answer your question, we will see large digital companies, I feel, going global, from US to the rest of the world, and from India to the US and the rest of the world as well. For US companies, it's always very tempting to continue to focus on the US because it's a $4 to $5 trillion industry, right? It's larger than the GDP of India, is what the US spends on healthcare, and it's so hard to scale that look, there is ample business reasons to just put your heads down and focus on one geography. But,
Yeah. And Pankaj, you touched upon, having massive patient volumes in India. And now we see one of the large biggest VC funds coming to India to create a lot of healthcare ventures. There's a large US, healthcare venture studios that's trying to enter India. There's a renewed focus on India and Indian healthcare. So I don't know if they're trying to build from India to the world, but do you see what are the unique advantage that India has when it comes to building healthcare? Uh, Anything that you see that it's unique points of leverage for a founder building in healthcare in India?
no, there's ample. We are blessed to have ample talent on both technology AI as well as clinical. Right, I think that's helpful. Those are the two raw ingredients you need to build a healthcare company. We're also sitting in a place or a time where large white spaces exist in care delivery in India. Of course, we made a lot of strides in building a lot of healthcare infrastructure over the last 15 to 20 years, right? There are thousands of beds added in terms of capacity. The likes of Apollo, Max, Fortis, Narayana, etc., expanding their footprint, expanding their top line, expanding the access that patients have to not only primary, secondary care, but also very complex, surgeries, etc. At the same time, we see large white spaces that are there, right? We built a few companies, sort of that you're familiar with, in areas like chronic pain or pediatrics or medical weight loss or now oncology, where we saw that there were opportunities to build. These opportunities don't exist in the US, right, per se. And so we're still, the healthcare ecosystem in India is also going through rapid changes. The rapid change is that for decades we had underinvested in healthcare, right, in terms of individuals being able to pay for healthcare. And over the last 5 years since the pandemic, we are playing catch up. The industry is growing 20% year on year. It's
Yeah.
massive, right? If you think about it, there's just the magnitude of the size of which healthcare industry is growing rapidly is phenomenal, and that is and we're still playing catch up. I think this growth will continue for the next decade, where Indians are underspending on healthcare today, and their spending will continue to increase. That opens up a lot of opportunities, where Indian consumers want access to higher quality of uh, care, want a slightly better elevated experience versus what they're waiting for. Historically, people have just been thankful that they've received care. And now there is a demographic that doesn't stop there, wants a little bit more. And then lots of innovation in healthcare continues to happen globally, and we are kind of playing catch up. So having a conversation with a hospital operator recently, and he said a very interesting thing. He said, you know, when we're in India, we're sitting in a time machine, right? You take a flight and you fly west or fly east, you'll see what the future of healthcare will look like in 5 or 10 years, because we are 5 or 10 years behind, and that opens itself up to you know these factors. I think lead to the opportunity to actually build meaningful companies.
And Pankaj, you touched upon experience, and you've previously spoken about experience as one of the key levers. So when you think about healthcare experience, right now is just about outcomes. Like you don't care to give a consumer experience just like you will get in a consumer tech or a SaaS to a patient. You just need to get okay and go home. Is there a large opportunity in kind of revamping that experience and treating you uh, like you're not here in the hospital, but actually get to get well?
Yeah, look, absolutely, it's a no-brainer, right? And I think that startups that are not focusing on that, like it's a missed opportunity, right? Like for large, you walk into a one of these large hospital chains. Uh, I was in one of the largest hospitals in Hyderabad recently, and very high end from a pricing standpoint. I walk in, I probably must have seen 20,000 people in that huge
Okay.
complex. Um, and when you have so much power, so much trust, and you deliver great care outcomes, uh, people will line up and be available for you. If you layer in using technology, really high quality experiences, um, especially in uh, especially for startups, I think there's a large opportunity to build consumer centric companies. Like India's, there are multiple demographics in India, that you have your top 50 to 60 million consumers, then you have your next 150 to 200 million consumers. I think these two categories would really resonate with higher quality experiences, because they're used to getting that from a Zomato or from a
Yeah.
ATM, or from any of these other consumer solutions that they're using. That's the opportunity. It's not easy to do though, right? A lot of people are like, look, why should it be any difficult? It's not easy to do because a lot of times being patient centric may not be clinically appropriate. A lot of times you have to make decisions that patients may not love, but may be right for them. So at that point, it's a fine line between how do we build patient experiences and be truly patient centric versus doing the right thing for patients. Simple example is like managing chronic diseases like diabetes, right? Like a lot needs to change, and a lot of times it's very hard for patients, because patients are not only going through their journeys of living like that for the last 10, 15, 20 years, but also a bunch of fears and like behavioral health issues that may be associated with their chronic disease. And uh, and a lot of times as a clinician, you want to get to great results quickly. You want to start that Ozempic, and you want to like put patients on on intermittent fasting, and you want to and while that will drive great clinical outcomes in a rational period of time, um, most clinicians are treading that fine line behind, okay, what is acceptable, what will patients be able to adopt on one end, and then how do you make the experience of patients extremely how do you improve the patient experience itself in order to take on some of these lifestyle modifications or these newer way of living almost, that you have to cater to. So look, I think uh, in chronic pain, for example, uh, the easy thing is prescribe another medication, right? And a bunch of pain medications are known for dependence. and what the patient-centric view versus what is right for patients might be very, very different, right? The patient wants to get rid of their pain. So, give me another opioid. The right thing to do for patients would be long-term rehab and, sometimes minimally invasive procedures and things that take time, right? So multiple times you're going to be challenged, or builders are going to be challenged with what is right for patients clinically and what is right for patients as to what they want. And so
Yep.
it's not that straightforward.
Yep. Pankaj, a lot of people who will watch this podcast is in the very early stages, want to explore healthcare, are exploring the opportunities inside healthcare. You have looked at multiple subsectors within healthcare. When you think of the next set of big opportunities for people who want to build in healthcare, what do you see? What is the biggest opportunities that you're excited about?
Yeah. But there are lots of opportunities, right? And this is not unique to what we're saying or what we're hearing. Um, there is a growing geriatric population in India. We don't have uh, something compelling that is scaled. We're seeing a lot of green shoots of interesting companies emerge in that space. But it's a large problem to solve, uh, and it's hard to solve because there isn't a way to pay for geriatric solutions besides out of pocket. Uh, there are things around personalized medicine that seem to be interesting, and longevity and um, or healthy living as a whole. Again, there are device companies that are scaling in that space, and but I feel there are companies that can. It's challenging to figure out, especially from a go-to-market perspective, and it's a space that will continue to see more traction and interest as we grow and scale. Mental health continues to be challenging, right? There are hundreds of startups in that space right now. The taboo continues, the willingness to pay remains low, the way to scale is not clear, and but more than 150 million Indians would need that kind of support today. Areas like oncology, um, that we're excited about, right? 150 million Indians alive today will die of cancer at some point in their life, and we don't have the infrastructure to kind of solve for it. And with the current model of care, we'll just not be able to get there. So opportunities are plenty. You look at every specialty, there is something compelling to build there. Um, the two pieces of caution, again, no rocket science here, is how can you build competitive moats so you can truly differentiate and be head of the pack is something that founders should think about in when they're building in healthcare, just like any other industry. And the second is where do the profit pools exist, right? It's very hard to uh, have consumers pay for things that they don't pay for today, especially in healthcare. And when you're thinking about a newer a new company in any of these spaces, like one should really think about how would you like what is your go to market, what is the willingness to pay, where do the profit pools lie, and build a company around that. For example, about 40% of outpatient spend in India is labs or medicines. That number in the US is about 14 to 15%, right? So those two, labs and medicines, become a very compelling part of the value proposition or solutioning when you're building a newer aged care model in India, unlike that in the West. And this is something to continue to think about when you're building a company in this space.
When you touched upon Moat, and I've recently, gone deep to understand Moat because When we chat with founders, there are a set of founders who would say, literally, execution is my only mode. I am not thinking about what would be the competitive advantage in all of this on day one. Maybe I'll think about it when I have like critical mass or scale. Would love to know your views on that. How do you think about moats on day one? And also, what are the moats that you see in healthcare when you look at these companies? So, if somebody's beginning to think of building a venture, how do they really deeply think about moats?
Look, we like building companies that are first to market. At 2070 Health, we're actually taking a contrarian view that we will build companies first to market and we'll out execute everyone because of the playbooks and the teams we've built. We've done this several times over. And so, be it clinical model design, be it clinical validation, be it go to market, be it B2B partnerships, be it insurance, coverage and penetration, uh, be it strategic acquisitions and M&A and all these things. Uh, our view is that we will build first to market companies. So we will get that extra 18 to 24 months versus the market. Um, and the other modes are around clinical model validation, the technology you can build around it, the scalability of the experience, right? When we are building, for example, a company in medical weight loss, um, the data available for using GLP-1s and other medications and how they react to a Caucasian man versus a 40-year-old woman in India, very different. So when we are building out this company, we have the advantage of being first to market. At the same time, we are uh, building a bunch of data that just doesn't exist, and fine tuning our clinical model and our care delivery model to that effect, so that we are able to use not only GLP-1s but also other medications to lead to high quality weight loss, and we're able to intervene on a lot of cultural aspects of weight loss that are often fairly complex to understand for companies not operating in the space. So I think for us, modes come from there as well. Right? Can we just build a clinical model that is heavily differentiated, basis the data that we're able to generate because we are first to market, and usually these are fairly under-researched specialties. Um, I think the third is just distribution. One of the modes is like, can you just lock in a lot of high quality distribution? Can you
Yeah,
acquire patient at a fraction of the cost versus your competitors who are coming in next? Now, can you do that as a startup predictably every time? The answer is absolutely not. And that is why in an area like healthcare, we really champion the venture studio model, where look, we have built a bunch of like distribution, I would say, partnerships, and we built like distribution advantages that allow our companies to go to market at a fraction of the price compared to traditional venture back company. And I feel that is it's very hard to do in healthcare. So when you talk about out execution, you're really talking about, look, I can create good product and I can distribute it at better than my customer, or my better than my peer, and that is awesome. It's very hard to do, and we are building this platform and infrastructure to enable doing that.
got it. Makes sense. Pankaj, in this, when we interviewed a lot of people at 2070 Health, those two kind of opportunities that people always excited about. One was longevity and one was mental health. And now, when we are forming this community of moonshot projects, there's again a bunch of young people who are excited about longevity and mental health. When they say they are excited about something like longevity, what they're actually saying is, we want to make healthcare more proactive. We don't want to have more sick people, and so on and so forth. In mental health, they have a role model to look on a moonshot projects. Like everybody have understanding what Wysa did. Pretty envy of what Wysa been able to achieve. But there's no such company as such in say longevity who have scaled or who have got to at least some kind of scale critical mass. Is that something you see that could happen in this being proactive or preventive kind of healthcare solutions? And all those variables and those programs and whatnot. Anything that you think would possibly work? Because there's a lot of people who are excited about the problem statement and are still like searching for insights and solutions in the space.
Yeah, I think the solutions that are scaled in longevity are really around tracking. Like, I will tell you what's happening, and maybe I'll give you some insights around what's happening in your body. But that converting that insight to action. Okay, I understand that these things are happening, and maybe there is some generalistic advice around. Okay, you do these four things if your, recovery is not great, or if you do these three or four things if your sleep is not great, or I think that converting that insight into actionable steps, breaking it down for personalizing it for that particular individual, and delivering that at scale is something where I think the next opportunity is. And look, longevity medicine itself is evolving. We don't understand it that well. There isn't much research when it comes to India.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of people with a bunch of hypotheses that are yet to be tested and clinically validated. So I feel someone's building a company in the space, right? Like, be science first. And there's a lot of good stuff happening in the US and other parts of the world in longevity. And how can you adapt that to the Indian context? And then use India as a test bed to also then launch into other countries that have, similar demographics of people, be it the Middle East and Southeast Asia. So again, the likes of Ultrahuman, etc., have done well in the first part of, right, like, what are the actionable insights that you're generating from your body, right? Be it your Whoop or be it your Aura Ring and others. And I think there's a part beyond this that is also very exciting that we'll figure out. Um, and in terms of mental health, look, the Wysa journey has been very interesting, and it's been very iterative, right? Wysa as a product has evolved over 700 times, um, and in the last year has kind of imbibed Gen AI into the fragment of the product itself. It's probably the largest conversational AI platform, or now Gen AI platform, for mental health in the world. And and I think to think about building mental health solutions for India, um, the big question comes down to, it's always simple things, right? Like, how do we break the stigmas and barriers, and build awareness around mental health issues and needs, and then how do we uh, build solutions that patients will have willingness or a way to pay for. Again, outpatient care in India is not covered by insurance. We have employer wellness where, there is some coverage. A lot of it is out of pocket, and these are not easy things to solve. The space of mental health is going through a lot of innovation in the West. There are a bunch of interventional, there are a bunch of tools like Wysa that are gaining prominence on one end. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have a bunch of interventional tools, including TMS, including newer medications like Spravato, etc., that are gaining prominence. Some of these might find their way in India, and founders can probably build, go to markets around them and build solutions and companies around them. Um, but it is challenging, not very straightforward.
When you first met the Wysa founders, what gave you the conviction? I just want to understand how the deal, got you excited. What are the key things that was really going right about Wysa when you first met them that made that deal happen?
No, look, I didn't want to take the meeting, right? Like, I was forced to take the meeting and by uh, one of our team members. And my first reaction, look, chatbot for mental health is a joke. Like, why are we, like, let's not get there. This was like
Yeah.
2020, 21. Um, and took the call with the team. I was consulting of a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist in Boston, at and I was telling him that, look, there's this tool that we're looking at. It seems interesting. I've been using it and playing around with it a little bit. What are your thoughts? Would you give it to your patients? Like, oh, this tool sounds like Wysa. I'm like, how do you know? Like, oh, I use Wysa for myself. I'm like, okay, there's something definitely interesting here. Like, why do you use Wysa for yourself? He's like, look, it's my 4 a.m. friend. Right? There are times when I need to vent out. There are times where I need um, a little bit of support. And so I use it for myself, and I heavily advise my patients to use it. And Vysa had no business at that point selling or distributing or being available to a physician in Boston or to patients in Boston. And these people are finding ways to use Vysa, right? D2C. And look, I think as we understood the company better, the body of clinical work they'd done, showing how Vysa and the entire platform, along with the conversational AI and now generative AI enabled CBT that they do, is at par with human therapists for many conditions. It's very compelling. One of the biggest challenges in mental health globally is just the lack of access. You just don't have the number of trained people you need in order to serve the millions of probably a billion or two people who need mental health support. And Vysa's dream is basically democratize mental health, right? Because AI can be made available to everyone at a very different price point, and some people will continue to need human support that can be provided on or off the platform. So the mission was very appealing and exciting. The clinical validation was very strong, and then managed to build a product in the space that patients loved. We saw about 150,000 reviews that were 5 stars on the App Store or the Play Store. The average rating was 4.9. I'm like, why would so it felt very counterintuitive, and when you use the product, you understand why the ratings are so high. So big fans of the mission of the company, and really hoping that we continue to impact more people there.
So, Pankaj, you touched upon one aspect that when you're really trying to do something revolutionary, which Wysa was when they started out in terms of having a chatbot for mental health, there's also a large part of storytelling, to the investors to actually change your viewpoint and what you've already seen. And a lot of the founders that we interact with in the Moonshot community is actually trying to do something very different and trying to sell to investors of not quite excited, was really looking for more understood models than not so understood models. So how do you think about doing that storytelling? Or how did the founders of Vysa, for example, sold you as somebody who didn't believe that chatbot could work for mental health to actually, making you a believer in that?
Look, we did the easy work. When they came to us, they already had, a few $1 million in revenue. They had 2 to 3 million people already using Vysa, and they were starting to, get more traction in the UK, US, etc. And they had a huge body of work clinically. Because as a physician, my first reaction was, look, I can't see, it's not intuitive to me.
Yeah.
And they were able to prove with data, with published research, with peer-reviewed research that, look, here's what we're seeing. They now have over 40 peer-reviewed publications, and they probably add 5 to 10 every year. Done about 15 clinical trials on the solution. And so for us, when we looked at Wysa, it wasn't all storytelling and narrative. It was like real evidence.
Yeah.
And advice on founders on how to storytell when they're starting a journey like Wysa early on is a hard one, to be honest, right? Like I think an incoming investor will still look at the same.
But let me flip that question. When you met founders, who's there any I mean, without maybe naming them, who was like an amazing storyteller that you went like, oh, this guy really know how to, tell a story, and maybe that could be some examples or learnings people could draw from.
Yeah. Look, I'm fairly traditional that way. I would really look for stories and promises and narratives. What we're really looking for is what is the vision of the founder? How credible is that vision? So we would when we're investing that early, we're typically investing in the person, and so the person's individual track record, like how they have handled the different places they've been so far, how they've handled failure, how they've resilience, hunger, like those kind of things matter most to us. I think why they're building a particular company, is extremely important, because we know that a lot of times these journeys are 7 to 10 year long, probably longer. And will they stick it out? And more importantly, I think when you're talking about the vision and the story of the company, like how defensible and believable that is. And we go through, just like how we do it at 2070 Health, like every incredible narrative about here's a company that we'll build that will change, that'll be a moonshot in oncology or a moonshot in, like, we do a bunch of work around diligence around, okay, if these things were true, would such a solution be able to go to market? Would such a solution be able to attract patients? What would the defensibility of
Yep.
such a solution be, etc.? What is the clinical validation so far, right? Like when we started, when Wysa was coming to being, there was emerging literature at that point talking about CBT delivered using AI, and that was gaining some early momentum. So there was some like clinical rationale behind what was being built at that point, and I think we'd look for that as well. So, but storytelling is incredibly important at all phases of company building, not only on day zero, actually every phase, right? There are helps not only unlock capital, but also really helps with unfair institutional partnerships, distribution, um, team building, right? Like building a
Yep.
company needs an incredible set of people. Building a healthcare company needs an incredible set of people who are mission aligned for the long term, and that's not easy a lot of times. So unlocking talent, I feel, is extremely important for and great storytelling is part of that, I feel.
Yep. Let me take you to a story on longevity, which we have been hearing in the group and from other founders who are early on thinking about this. So we talked about two things, right? One is getting consumers to pay because there's no real sick care that's happening. There's no hair on fire problem. And then there's actually giving them outcomes. So one of the stories and one of the ways that people have been thinking about is to say that, hey, maybe the way to get people to pay is more around aesthetics. We see a lot of that play out in the UAE, saying, hey, you're aging, you have wrinkles, whatever that is. Here is an aesthetic play where you could look here. That's something that people usually pay for. It could be around weight loss or dermat procedures or whatnot. But then once you actually get a foot in the door or build trust, can you leverage the existing innovations in the US, maybe stem cell therapy or whatever is the longevity research that's happening to start giving outcomes on a bunch of those things. So I know few people who are early on thinking about partnering with some of those longevity clinics and bringing them to India. I know a few people who are thinking about actually opening some of these clinics and experimenting with that. Recently, a good investor from a good domestic fund left a job thinking I want to do something in longevity, and a thought process was something similar of opening a clinic and being in the services business of longevity. How do you view that space? And when you hear such stories, and I'm sure you'll be looking at the space. What's your thoughts on that space?
Look, I think to get to the audience you've mentioned, right? Someone who is interested in aesthetics, someone who's interested in weight loss. It's not inexpensive. It's a fairly expensive journey, because these are patients being served by hundreds of well-backed scaled companies. So though the insight around a hook into longevity is around what people are today interested in paying for, is absolutely spot on. The ability to get in front of that patient uh, is is pretty expensive, right? It's possible, but it's expensive. So I think the litmus test is how good is your solution versus status quo, right? If it's 10x better,
Yeah.
then there will be virality. What a typical healthcare brand, like if you think about a typical physician starting their practice, they take 10 years to really build word of mouth. Some physicians are able to do it in 5 years. Some physicians take 25 years, or some physicians it never happens. Uh, the journey for startup in healthcare services is, can you build that in 12 to 18 months? The only way to build that is if you have 10x better outcomes than competitors, and the experience is markedly different, is very aspirational and high quality. So if you and for preventative or uh, push based kind of services, you need that even more. If you're a patient with a brain tumor, these things probably matter less because there's a huge motivation to go and get treatment, and listen to the best voice that you have access to. But for longevity, or for of preventative health as a broader base, there isn't uh, that push, right? Or
Yeah,
there isn't that inherent desire for millions and millions of people to go down that road. So I would be guided by extremely differentiated clinical results and extremely differentiated experience.
got it. Makes sense. Pankaj, one of the key themes of today is Gen AI, and we at Capri are super bullish and looking at Gen AI health tech investments. So, as somebody who's looked at healthcare in depth, what is your thought process on where could be the biggest opportunity for Gen AI in healthcare?
Yeah. Look, I think Gen AI has kind of created a even playing field for a bunch of startups that are emerging. For example, if you think about the ambient note taking companies that were built before the advent of Gen AI, right? Before or the AI physician companies, right? Like we see a bunch of AI physician companies in the West and now evolving in India as well. When they were being built 5 or 10 years ago, they had to build a whole bunch of the foundational technology infrastructure themselves.
Yeah,
And now you have LLMs that will do as good a job, sometimes a better job, and that kind of creates an equal playing field. The challenge with that is that your moats go away, right? That you have built over the years. And so when we're thinking about Gen AI companies, uh, really thinking about how differentiated is the technology and what are the moats built around the company. And in most cases, we're kind of like apprehensive, or we're in the wait and watch kind of category when it comes to Gen AI solutions that we're seeing today for the Indian market. There are Gen AI solutions in the India US corridor. Some of them are scaling well. The ones that are scaling well are probably the ones that have made significant investments in the go-to-market, right?
yeah,
Very high quality capability built out that is unique and compelling for the market. Fairly differentiated capability offering. The technology might not be super differentiated, but the offering is. And then very strong go-to-markets, playbook of targeting the segment, being very clear about the segment they're going after, targeting that segment really well, and out executing their peers from a go to market lens. And those we continue to be excited about. Right? There'll be a lot of B2B AI solutions companies that will be built from India uh, for the world, mainly the US market in healthcare. That'll also there'll also be services companies that will operate at near software margin because of their ability to use AI. Again, heavily focused on certain capabilities. So those are also companies we are excited about, right? Like if you think about revenue cycle management or prior authorization or like call centers and a whole bunch of work that happens out of India for the US, uh, those industries will continue to get transformed. They have to be transformed because status quo is just too inefficient and too human driven. Um, so profit pools exist in these spaces, and I think those are the first ones that will have winners when it comes to India US corridor AI innovation. Um, some of the patient facing stuff will take some more time, I believe, and we've not come across anything we uh, love in that corridor where we're like, okay, let's use this Gen AI solution that'll work with patients
yeah.
directly. But we're more excited about B2B kind of solutions in the India US corridor on AI.
Thanks a lot for taking out the time, Pankaj. It's been super insightful. Thanks for being our first guest on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
And we look forward to doing more such sessions going forward.
Sort of always a pleasure. Thank you, and good luck for your podcast. Take care.